Now, one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is how to make that club go fast. So much so because I was a very short hitter as a young lad, and as I grew up and got bigger, you know, it seemed like all the other kids passed me by in terms of that distance. So as I learned to make it go fast myself, it was a long process, but once I learned how to do it, it was made me feel a lot better about my game. Now, it's not that we need to hit it super far at this handicap level to get you to the next level. What we want to do is to be able to get the most out of what we have, though, so that you can really maximize your power. Now, rare is the golfer who can hit the ball 280 or 300 yards consistently, and luckily at our handicap level here, we don't need to do that to score well. So again, we're not trying to turn you into Tiger Woods here. We're trying to teach you about how to get the very most out of your power. Now, my favorite thing for teaching this is the towel. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a towel for a moment and talk about how to make that club go fast. And I tell you, this information would have served me well growing up. Basically, the physics behind cracking a whip or snapping a towel is very similar to the physics of making a golf club go fast. So let's analyze a little bit about the way this works. It's a surprisingly powerful motion. You can see that I don't have to go all crazy with my body to make the tip end go fast. So it's a very controlled motion in terms of what I'm doing, but the tip end is going like crazy. A whip works the same way. When you crack the whip, it snaps like crazy at the end, generating a lot of speed, even though I'm not working that hard. Now, if we analyze this a little more closely, and if I were to tell you that a whipping motion has to be done at the end, where you're going to go ahead and save all your power till the very last moment and then give it a crack. Now, if you watched me do that, you'd say to yourself, okay, that sounds logical. But if you look closely at it, that's not at all how I'm doing it. What's happening as I move into this motion is that I'm expending all my force in the beginning, getting it going on its way like this, boom, and then basically the towel just glides. If we look at this in slow motion, you'll see what happens. My hand is actually coming back the other way at the moment of truth. When the thing is slinging forward, my hand is actually coming back this way in a whipping motion. Wasn't that the darndest thing? You'd swear that to hit something powerfully, you'd have to drive into it, but you can see there in that motion, I'm actually coming back the other way. And so what happens here, the tip end, there is no denying that it slings forward with a tremendous amount of force. But there's no force coming from here. It comes from me generating that speed with a little movement of the body, swinging my arm, and then it snaps forward like that. Now, I want to analyze it a little more closely still to see that what would I do to make this towel snap harder. Certainly driving my hand on through it is going to destroy the whipping motion entirely. So what I want to do, if I want to snap it harder, once I send it on its way, there's nothing I can really do at the end to make it go faster. I can't give it a special flick of the wrist. What I can do is send it on its way harder, so I get that initial movement going a little bit stronger. And by physics, what happens exactly is that this towel basically gets loaded with a kinetic energy as soon as I send it on its way. The whole towel has that energy in it. As I send it on its way and bring my hand back the other direction, that kinetic energy gets focused into a smaller and smaller area until finally it snaps at the end. So, if I want to snap it harder, I have to send it on its way stronger. So what happens is, as I move it stronger through the air and give it more kinetic energy, it pops harder at the moment of truth. Now, if I wanted to go back bigger still and send it on its way stronger still, now I can really get a good snap on it. So that's how I'm going to generate that extra speed, is to move this object through the air. I don't wait until the end. It's at the beginning of the motion that I get the speed going. Now let's take a moment and take a look at how that works in the golf swing. If it's going to act like a whip, we've got to be built like a whip. So this is the end of our whip down here, and if you think about that towel or the end of a whip, how flopping loose it is, well, my wrists have to be the same way to be able to generate that same kind of speed. So as I send it on its way, as a golf swing, what's going to happen is I move strong into the downswing with my body motion. I've got weight shift and turn. You notice I'm not really breaking it into small body parts like elbows and knees, but I want you to grasp the concept here. It's a strong overall movement. My weight is shifting, my body is turning. My hands and arms are just loose. They're getting pulled along for the ride. Now the trick is here is to make this movement, and what I'm going to call that is core movement. That this is the core of our body, that we're shifting weight and sending that core on its way strong in the beginning of the downswing. So in other words, I'm moving very, very strong into it to get it all started. Once that happens, the club is just gliding through the air, and it feels very much with those soft wrists like a snap, if you will, like a whipping motion, just like we did with that towel. What I don't want to do is to try to make my hands drive through the shot. All of a sudden, that kills the whipping motion that I need to make the club go fast. If I go ahead and try to do that, you can see here a very long and extended follow-through, pushing the club through the air, and now all of a sudden I've lost the whipping motion. Now I have a lot of effort, but not nearly as much speed. So what I want to do to get the club going is I'm going to move very strong into the downswing. It's the initial movement that gets it all going. I haven't done anything with my wrists. The centrifugal force will take over and sling it forward for me. Here you can see it in slow motion. I'm making a nice powerful wind-up in the backstroke, but here's the real moment of truth. As I get to the top, my body will start to move in a very strong fashion. The club just lays back in response to that. There's that core movement going, and then the centrifugal force slings the club forward for me. It's that core movement at the top of the backswing moving me into the downstroke that's the key. So I'm going to go ahead and hit a couple of shots. And before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the incorrect motion that we see so often. Let's imagine for a second that I didn't have any core movement, that my body were locked in stone. Well, something's got to move this club. So if my body doesn't, then my arms and wrists will. That's what makes this type of swing look so odd, is that my body is not moving. I'm just moving it with my arms and wrists. I can also move it with my wrists only, which now you'll see the novice player do that. The opposite motion, of course, is to go ahead and move it forward with my core. The second thing that sabotages this motion is turning my wrists into a stone. If my wrists are too stiff when I swing, that also destroys the whipping motion. So as I swing back and forth, if I turn my wrists into a stone, again, I'm back into a motion where I can add a lot of effort but not get a lot of payback from it. It's quite subtle, actually, but let's take a look at the two different motions. Now, the first one I'm going to do here is the incorrect motion, where I won't move my core strong and I'll keep my wrists a little on the stiff side. Now, it's not the worst swing that you've ever seen, but you do see that one out there sometimes. If you picked it apart position-wise, it wouldn't be awful, but it produced an awful result. Now, if I go ahead and soften everything up and move that core motion stronger, you're going to see a movement here that instead of hitting at 150 with the driver, that motion's going to hit it more like 260 or 270 on the fly with the driver. So that has to do with soft wrists, core movement, moving as strong as I can. Now, in terms of that hitting area, again, talking about the hand motion and how it works, very interesting story where I was hitting balls to right next to the reigning national long drive champion at the time. He wasn't a super big guy, but did he kill it. So I was right behind him in the stall, right behind him, watching him hit. And he would come into the hitting area and his hands would almost stop for a moment there as the club lashed by. And I can remember thinking, gosh, that's the darndest thing. You'd think that the world's longest hitter would have the world's fastest hands, but it didn't work that way at all. He had a fast club, all right, but his hands were just whipping on the way through. So that's really the way that it works in terms of that hand motion, letting that club sling by very, very soft hands. Now, I know what many of you are thinking, that how on earth would you be able to hit the ball straight doing that? Well, believe it or not, hitting the ball this way, you actually hit it straighter. That's right. What happens is, when the club is swinging back and forth, if I hang on to it very tightly, it's easy for me to influence the club face and the direction that the club is swinging. So I can influence it up or down, I can close the face or open it, and the very slightest movement on the club head out of the desired path can create a miss hit. So that feeling of controlling and trying to hit it just so actually makes me miss hit and actually makes the club come in incorrectly sometimes. When I swing back and forth with my wrist soft, well, now the club cuts through a very consistent path, and the only way I could alter it is if I alter the whole shape of the swing, moving it back and forth. So this type of movement where you just let the club swing with very soft wrists actually helps you to hit it more consistently and straighter after all. Now there's a way I want you to test in terms of your wrist strength and your grip pressure to see if you're doing it correctly. If you hold the club in front of you straight up and down and grip it, if I were to let loose of the club enough for it to slip out of my hands, we could call that a 0. If I'm holding it as tightly as I can, we could call that a 10. Where I would want you to be is somewhere around a 2 or a 3, so very, very soft in your wrists. The second thing is if you let the club drift a little to the side, that it should fall. So that's how soft your wrists are. And the trick is to keep that softness throughout the whole motion. So not only in the beginning of the swing and the change of direction, but all the way throughout the motion. There was a great player, George Knudson, that talked about giving up control to get control. That's what this is all about, is how to go ahead and let the club swing and do the thing that you hear every Sunday, and that is trust your swing. How oftentimes we hear the player who's holding the trophy saying, I really trusted my game today and I trusted my swing. Who cares if you trusted your swing? What does it matter? Well, it matters because if he's trying to guide the club and control it, then all of a sudden the shots go crooked. I always tell my students, if you're going to control something on the course, control your emotions. Don't try and control the club. So letting that club whip, that's the thing to do to get your maximum power. Soft wrists. In terms of how soft do you want them, you can't have them too soft, and the softer the better. You will get a little sense that the club is tugging on your hands during the swing. That's the centrifugal force. Don't worry about that. That's something that you'll feel, and you shouldn't get any feeling like the club is going to go flying, but those soft wrists will really help you with your power.